Hello, welcome everyone. We are just about to get started with our barcoding huddle with our special guest this month, Ivanti Wavelink. Hi, Peter, welcome. Sam, Keri, if you want to go ahead and join me on camera, that would be great. Woohoo!
Hi, Jody.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I know people will be filtering in as per their busy schedules allow, but we're going to go ahead and get started today. So I'm your host, Jody Costa. I'm with Barcoding Incorporated. We are a supply chain automation innovation company, and we are located here in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm actually coming to you live from our Baltimore headquarters. So if you hear craziness, you know exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from my coworkers. Hopefully we won't hear too much, but heads up that I am in the office. And so what I wanted to do today, we're going to be getting started here in a few minutes. We are Barcoding. We're thrilled to be hosting these huddles, having these conversations with some of our all-time favorite partners. And today we're going to be discussing how to modernize your supply chain with a cloud model for your mobility. And I'm really excited about this topic because there's some really big themes that we're going to talk about, and there's also some technical weeds that we're going to go into. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. So once again, welcome Ivanti Wavelink. Thank you for being part of this barcoding huddle today. And I'm going to go ahead and start with some introductions, and then we'll start to roll into the conversation. So Peter, looks like you are in my upper left, so I'm going to let you go first with your introduction.
Always happy to be in the upper left quadrant there. Actually, it's supposed to be the upper right if you're talking about Gardner, right? But anyway, thank you so much for allowing me and Sam to participate. We're excited. Barcoding is a great partner of ours. A little bit about me. I've been with Ivanti Wavelink about 13 years now. Pretty much all on the sales management side. Initially, kind of running the Western region in the United States. Most recently, the last year and a half or so, running all of sales for Americas. My history goes back a little bit further than that, about 25 years in the mobility, handheld, barcoding space, if you will, starting off with Telzon, kind of migrating over into the symbol world and so on and so forth. But just really excited to be a part of this. I think this is a conversation that a lot of customers are asking about, and there's a lot of questions out there. So hopefully we can answer some of those for everyone today.
Thank you, Peter. And just for the folks who maybe are outside of our industry, when you say you're from the Telzon days, it means you're legit.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Sam, let's have you go next.
Hi, everybody. I am Sam Gonzales. I am the Director of Global Systems and Solutions for Ivanti. Now, for people who have worked with Ivanti Wavelink in the past, you may know this, but a lot of people may not. We're a company that has a lot of tenure. For example, I have a guy on my team that's been with the company over 30 years now. And so when I tell people how long I've been with the company, it sounds impressive, but internally, I'm still the new guy. I just passed my 10-year mark. I think you have to hit about 20 before you're considered an old timer. So we'll see. I hope I get there. It's a great company to work for, and there's a reason people stick around as long as they do. The other thing that's great about that is that we have a ton of expertise. I have not been in the industry long enough to be coming from the Telzon era, but we have a number of folks in our organization that are, and I'm blown away all the time when we get into these accounts, the history that everybody knows with the technology, the customers, the industry. There's a lot of great knowledge there.
Yeah, that's great. And we're definitely going to be talking about that history in a little bit. But I've been very fortunate, Sam, to have worked with you on a number of different occasions. And for those in the audience who were part of the Barcoding Geek Tank series back in 2019, you may have heard from Sam back then. So great to have both of you, Peter, Sam, here with us today. And a special guest with us as well, Keri Corbin from Barcoding. So Keri, you want to give a brief introduction for yourself?
Sure. Keri Corbin, I'm Vice President of Client Solutions at Barcoding. And Sam, you're an old timer compared to me. I've been there for 8 months. Previously coming from the customer side. So I have some pretty significant experience with service management, device management, a lot of the stuff these guys are talking about today, and how to build the business case, build the confidence of the operations, IT, finance on, how you build a plan for migrating to the latest and greatest technology. So happy to be here and help support this crew.
Excellent. Well, we're happy to have you as always, and we're certainly happy to have you on the Barcoding squad. I'm clocking in at almost 11 years, so I'm sort of becoming an old timer here. Hate to admit that, but it's true. So, well, let's get going. Again, thrilled to have the panel, and you have a chat function for those of us joining live. You have a chat function, so please feel free to add your questions. There's also, I guess, a Q&A function, so either one works. But we're going to get going. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, and this is really just to start us back at a pretty, basic spot, and it's this concept of the barcode scanner is no longer just a scanner. I mean, in certain situations it is, but what we're talking about today, when we talk about these mobile handhelds, there's mobile computers, we're talking about sophisticated computing devices, right? So these aren't meant just to do a point scan. They are as sophisticated as a laptop would be. And so I think there's been a sea change that's happened in our industry, this mobile data capture industry, to say like, wow, imagine the possibilities if we start to think of these tools as being much more than they are or they have been back on the Windows mobile operating system, or when you would deploy them to do your inventory scans and then think nothing else beyond that. So one of the things that I'm excited about today is that there's always evolution and change in technology, and there's always progression. We're on an infinite continuum, if you will. And so what we're going to be going into is what are some of these current sea changes in our space, and then how do we handle them? And obviously, all of us have just gone through a year of pandemic, so we know all about disruption nowadays. We know all about things that come out of the blue that we're not necessarily prepared for. And so I think our crew, we're trying to get our customers as prepared as possible, and also to be thinking ahead and keeping that mindset of this is going to be about continual change, right? So without further ado, I want to talk about, going back to this first conversation, I think that Sam, you and I had, which is, there's one of the biggest changes kind of enterprise mobile strategy side is moving from that Windows mobile operating system to an Android operating system. I know we still have customers who are on Windows Mobile. So maybe walk us through this this most recent change in the enterprise mobile data capture space, and then we'll start to move forward into the Android enterprise APIs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, honestly, the technology in our industry has just changed tremendously in the last 5 to 10 years, really a lot in the last 5. And a lot of that kind of stemmed from Microsoft kind of leaving the mobile industry. They decided they weren't going to support the old Windows CE and Windows mobile platforms anymore. And so that left the industry, trying to figure out what the next best thing is. And at the same time, you have the Android operating system that is rising in popularity in the consumer market. It's open source, it's available for manufacturers to use, and even better, it's robust and it fits the needs for what people need. And so that was a big push, right? Everybody had to go through this migration to get from Windows over to Android. I think at this point, most of the customers that I've worked with have made that jump. They're past that point. But now they're in a new ecosystem, right? They're playing in the Google Android world now. And Android takes a lot of things very seriously, specifically security, right? They're a consumer, they run a lot of consumer devices. They have to protect people's information. So they are very security conscious. And so they really push people to stay up to date. That kind of model of picking a version of something and staying on it for 15 years doesn't work well in the Android space because you can't keep a system secure. So right now what we're seeing is as people are getting into Android, they're realizing they need to have a better strategy of how am I going to move? How am I going to upgrade my operating system version? How am I going to refresh my devices at a reasonable rate so that I can keep up the security? And Google's dictating a lot of that. They've kind of set the rules to say, hey, you can only stay on a version for so long. And as a wow, Google actually heard me talking about them and decided to chime in there. That's a little borderline creepy. But so now we've kind of found ourselves on this treadmill, and there's a lot of positives, but there's also a lot of concerns and confusion around that. And so I think the topic we wanted to kind of focus on today is how this is going to affect the way that we manage these devices going forward in this new Android ecosystem, in this new quickly moving environment.
Right, and before we jump all the way into the management within this new Android ecosystem, just briefly, Keri, if you wouldn't mind touching, for those folks who might be in the audience going, oh man, I am not yet there. You know, can you talk us through from the Barcoding perspective what we can do maybe to help accelerate that process to get those folks into the Android ecosystem and why it's so important to do that now?
Absolutely, yeah. So we offer a lifecycle management service that's everywhere from taking a look at your current environment and helping build out, you know, not only what devices that you want to move to, but what the order is. I think there's this assumption that day one you have to buy 5,000 new devices and deploy them, you know, 1, 2, 3 at midnight, and everybody hits the button and goes to the new device. And it's just frankly not how it has to work. We can move as slowly or as quickly as needed to get them rolled out. You know, everybody's different. Some companies have 1 or 2 users that are their technology early adopters, and we get them in their hands and let them start convincing everybody why they're so great. You know, some want to go all in and do everything at one time. So our team really helps figure out the best fit for that specific customer. We work on how we get there as far as getting applications migrated, MDM tools, you know, everything that goes into it. And then, you know, we talk about patching and security. So Sam brings up a good point. I think when the industry first went to Android, it was like, Android's not secure, right? So that was the first, I think, thing I heard from our end users was like, it's not going to be as secure as what we had. And we've done a great job as an industry kind of squashing that assumption. But it's a different world in keeping the OS and the security patching updated from what it was before. And, you know, having that conversation, how far behind do you want to be on OSs, and explaining kind of what this life cycle looks like. We were joking before everybody got on, but it's the whole sweating the asset, like gone are the days of keeping them for 15 years. That's the part of the conversation Barcoding can really help with C-level people, is that doesn't quite make sense because the space has never been like that before. So helping with that conversation, building that story, talking about, you know, what other things you get from these devices is something we're really interested in helping out with.
Yeah, I'm assuming, Peter, you've probably seen this in the conversations you're having.
Yeah, Jody, thanks. Yeah, I was going to comment on that. You know, we still talk to customers, and certainly there's more comfort level with cloud and so on, but there's still those security questions that a lot of people have. But I think a lot of times some of the customers we talk to think that, well, if they don't do anything, who's going to really focus on our issues when we have all of these old devices, right? Are they going to really try to infiltrate our network? And it's kind of like that mentality is a lot about security by obscurity, which really isn't a great path to take. The other thing I would say too is in this transition that was just talked about, you know, we can do things on the licensing side too that helps with this transition from Windows Mobile to Android, you know, like from a subscription model with licensing. So you buy a license today that you put on a Windows device that you have in your environment, and over that period of, you know, time, that term of that agreement, then you can take that same license and move it over to an Android device. So that really helps the transition as well.
Yeah, so for our audience, you know, I hopefully this is encouraging that the pathway, the migration to a modern mobile strategy is more firm than it's ever been because of companies out there like Barcoding and Ivanti Wavelink who can help, right? Leaning on your partners is very, very important, your ecosystem. And then of course, you know, so step one, right? Let's make sure that we don't abide by the security by obscurity. I like that, Peter. I haven't heard that yet, but I think that, you know, it starts to, not only does that make me feel a little twitchy just in general, as it doesn't feel that secure. It also makes me think of a lot of opportunity costs for waiting, because often the affordances that we get from the field aren't necessarily clear before they start using it. So I think of all the opportunity costs that would be wrapped up into a mindset like that. So let's assume, though, we bringing people along. Hopefully, everyone's kind of taken that information and known that this is the right time to reach out and kind of get into the Android ecosystem. But now we're in Google's world, right? Don't tell Sam's phone. We're in Google's world, and we need to figure out how to really think ahead and be able to keep up with the amount of change. And it's not bad change, it's just a different cadence. It's a different type of cycle that we're going to be in versus where we have been in the past. So I know that we've got if we think about where people have started with Android, and we have these different versions of Android out there. There's another compelling event. So first compelling event was Windows Mobile goes end of life. This next compelling event was actually announced in 2017, which is that Google's device admin tool is not going to be used, and they're going to be moving people to the Android Enterprise. So those old APIs won't be available. Well, this is going to start to take effect come Android 11. So, let's talk a little bit about what this compelling change means. And Sam, can you hear us? Are you here, or are you just off completely?
No, he looks like he's dropped.
Okay. All right. Well, Peter, we're going to let you jump in to kind of, start to think about, well, let's walk through when you're talking to your customers about the Android ecosystem, what it means to be part of this Android ecosystem from an enterprise mobile strategy standpoint. What are the kinds of things that you're telling them to be prepared for?
Well, first and foremost, we're, as I think it was alluded to earlier, plan in advance, right? And think about what the next steps are going to be. We talked a little bit about, you have the ability to kind of keep your devices, if you're currently running Android today, for a period of time, but that period of time is going to go away. So you do have to plan ahead, plan accordingly, and understand, what the time frames are, and perhaps at least if when things stop, right? You can work from that date and work back and put together a specific plan that targets that, end of life date, end of support date, and then you can accordingly put together the proper business plan to move forward.
Keri, has that been your experience too, the kind of your thought process when you were managing this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the first thing is knowing what you have, taking that inventory, knowing what you have. And, if you work in a larger company where asset management might not have always been, the easiest thing to keep track of, taking that inventory can sometimes become a very interesting task. But, with barcoding, we have tools like Boss where we can look at your inventory. But yeah, it's about taking a look at, whether you do have devices already on Android and figuring out a migration plan to the next version, or taking a device that, all jokes aside, is 15 years old and figuring out how to get that moved and what the right path to get there. It's more of an art than a science, and it's really working with all of the partners and getting everyone together and figuring out the right way to go.
And one more kind of business question before we get back into the technical piece. I mean, what I think is really interesting, though, is that this is no longer just a conversation that an IT person can have for themselves, right? Because it's got its fingers into all these different components of an organization, and sometimes internally, I'm sure Peter, Keri, Sam, you guys see this. These conversations need to be happening more holistically, right? So that your plan needs to involve many different stakeholders than it may have past. So, Keri and Peter, do you want to kind of comment a little bit on that? Because I think that's an important point for our customers who may be saying, well, yeah, I mean, it's one thing for me to create a plan in my role, but what do I need to consider in terms of the rest of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, the first thing really is to talk about a mobile user's experience, right? So, getting someone who represents the actual end users, whether it's someone in operations or even an end user themselves, and talking through what is your experience with your current devices? What type of things could we do to make you better and more efficient? And kind of walking through each role and player. There's a tendency with IT to have IT conversations with IT vendors and not reach out outside of IT. I can put any device in anyone's hand at any site, but if it doesn't help them do their job better, if it doesn't give them an opportunity to, again, these are little mobile computers now. So what other things could we potentially add to those devices to make your life easier? And so we're attempting to work with customers on, let's talk about the different roles. Finance plays a part in it as well, because again, you don't have the hockey stick where every 15 years you have this huge spend. You're able to kind of step into it and spread your spend out. It'll happen more quickly because we can't sweat the assets, but there's a way to manage that and flatten that out. And really having that conversation with the right people so that they can understand it. Or if you can't get them in the room, help the people who are meeting with you on the talking points that they can take to those people.
Right. And I'm kind of thinking like, okay, so we're getting more devices in more people's hands. We're doing more on these mobile computers. So I'm going to come back to this management piece, because if these things are true, right, the complexity has just gone up. And so Sam, one of the things that we were talking about is that now you're in this Android ecosystem, and and this is where, my knowledge starts to hit the wall, but we know that there's another compelling event coming with Android 11 and the way that we need to start to manage from an enterprise mobile strategy standpoint. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what this compelling event is and why it matters so much? Oh, he might be frozen. So Sam's in a hotel room right now. So that's why we may be struggling with his internet connection. So, well, I will jump in here. So what we're going to be talking about here is that starting with Android 11, you need to use Android Enterprise APIs. Device admin, Google Device Admin will be no longer, right? So there's going to be a need to think through your mobile device management strategy, right? And this is where this cloud concept comes in. We're going to need to rely on Google's cloud services. Peter, do you want to take a stab at jumping in on kind of explaining maybe what this cloud model means for people, or take that question however you like and go wherever you want, because we don't have time.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things, and I did want to hit upon what Keri was saying a moment ago, though, too. In your point, there's a lot of different pieces and parts of the organization that are now involved in these projects, right? And so I see a lot in talking with customers that you have all these disparate groups and disparate responsibilities. At least one key thing, and I think it was kind of mentioned, but I want to hit home on it a little bit more, is really have someone that's totally in control, kind of like the project manager, right? That can take everything from all these disparate groups and pull it together and make sense of it, so that the objectives for this transition are met in a timely fashion. Yeah. As far as just some of the cloud related stuff. Yeah, I mean, with going to Android for Enterprise, there are certain things that, you won't be able to do in that environment that you can do now, which is going to create this transition, these challenges of moving these mobile devices over to, the Android 11, the Android for Enterprise space. And that's going to create a lot of planning that's required and so on.
Right, which is why, we bring up the partner conversation again as being vital. So you mentioned project management, talking about if any technology change, we're talking about change management, and a saying that we have at Barcoding is to focus on process, people, and technology. And so often, we are obviously talking about some technological changes, but really it's also going to impact process and people. And I think the way that we manage this mobile ecosystem, that's the mindset I think that we're trying to change here. Would you agree with that, Keri?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's it's not just hardware anymore. It's, what experience a user has with it and ensuring that it's secure and, what applications can you put on it? There's so much power in this new device that untapped is really, dare I say, an irresponsible use of money. If we're rolling these devices out and we're just scanning on them, we're not doing our job at barcoding with having conversations with our customers as far as all the other things that they can do, whether it's a canned app that's been developed by another company or, using vendors to build in-house apps and get you to a place where you're on a single device and doing multiple things, whether it's clocking in when you get there, calling someone else that's within the organization. I mean, there's hundreds of opportunities and we really have to focus less on the actual physical piece of hardware, the form factor, and more on the power of, what happens inside of it. I think, Jody, you mentioned earlier, it's a lot like a laptop, and, you don't always focus on what the outside of the laptop looks like, but when you have all these great tools running on the laptop and it makes your job easier, then, obviously you don't really care what it looks like. And then, Peter, to your point, as we're moving to the new version, when things start to slow down or stop working on the older version, that's where we have to start getting, upgraded into version 11 and making sure that it's functioning the way that it needs to function.
Right, because nobody wants downtime and nobody wants, and then I'm assuming, there's many, maybe not one of them, I'm not a control freak, but I would imagine, because as you're talking and as I'm thinking about all the dependencies and the connections and, the complexity, that we want some measure of control. And I think this is where the security conversation really comes into play. So security is probably a driving factor for a lot of organizations to really take a strong look at how they're managing this ecosystem, this mobile ecosystem. Peter, from some of the more recent conversations that you're having, could you give us kind of a flavor of what people are talking about when they're talking about security within this mobile space? Like, what are you hearing out there today?
Yeah, I think the customers that we talk to it's all about, it can even boil down to going down into what applications do we have access to, right? And which applications don't we have access to? Do we have the ability to, we being a user in a warehouse or a retail store, have access to get out to other parts of the internet when they shouldn't be? We talked about, these devices are certainly like a platform play without question because they can do a lot, but we also want to make sure that they're secure enough that they can't go out and do something that the users shouldn't be doing, right? So a lot of it, a lot of what we talk to is, whitelist, blacklist of different applications or functions, or even locking down the device so that it can only get into the applications or the use cases that that particular user is entitled to.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about, kind of how do you work through those conversations with a customer? So you talked about whitelist, blacklist. Like how do you talk through that with a customer? When do you talk through that with a customer?
Yeah, we do that a lot in combination with, our joint meetings that we have with barcoding and the customer. But I think it's simply you just have to understand, the use case and what the user can and can't do. And I hopefully, you convey to the customer that, what we're trying to do is help them out. And if we understand their challenges, what they're trying to do, and they're willing to open up, at least about some of the problems that they may have or future challenges that they have, then we can go out and kind of devise a plan that can take those conversations to the appropriate level within that unique customer.
Yeah, I have to be willing to open up, I guess, to your partner friends and actually understand that probably in today's world, it's going to be really difficult to know everything you need to know, right? One person isn't going to necessarily need to have all of the answers, right? So that's why we need this web of partners that help us. So Sam.
Hi. I was going to say, it would not be a Zoom call without some technical issues. And unfortunately, today it's my turn.
That's okay. Anything can happen on live TV, Sam.
Right.
We roll. So we've been having, we've missed you, but we've been having a good conversation. And what I want to do now that you're back is kind of go back and touch upon a couple things that the rest of us needed your expertise on. So we really want to talk about that compelling event that's going to drive a lot of change within the Android ecosystem today. And kind of what does that mean for customers who are wanting to plan ahead and they really want to make sure that they have a tight, a kind of a good enterprise mobile strategy looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I get into that, I did just want to give just a brief history of, kind of where we've been so we can understand where we're going. So I'm going to speak from, my experience with Wavelink and our story in the industry because, we started doing just a telnet client 30 years ago, was the original first product. And we had a situation, I've heard this story many times, we would have to send people out and they'd have to stage 100 different devices. And back then these were DOS devices. So they'd plug everyone in, they'd push the files, they'd manually configure every single device. And so about 25 years ago, one of our engineers decided this really sucks. This is painful. And so they actually developed a platform to wirelessly push and configure the telnet client. And that was our first foray into what we call mobile device management. Now, over the years, that's evolved quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of confusion because people hear a lot of different terms. There's MDM, mobile device management. There's EMM, enterprise mobility management. There's UEM now, which is unified endpoint management. At the end of the day, to summarize it for people, any of those terms, it's a set of software that's designed to manage and configure and secure your devices, whatever they may be. In this case, we're talking about Android barcoding type devices. Now, things changed a lot when we entered the Android world. With Windows, it was a little bit of the wild, wild west in that they kind of said, here's an operating system, do what you want. There was not really a lot of security. There was not a lot of checks and balances. You kind of had free reign over the entire file system over anything you wanted to do. Well, Android, being a much more security conscious operating system, has a lot more restrictions and guidelines and specific ways that they want you to manage the device. So as part of that, they're actually making some changes. So Android has management today, but the way that it's done, Google's looked at it and they've decided this is not the best way to do it. It's not as secure as it could be. So they're moving towards a platform called Android Enterprise. And what Android Enterprise is basically it's a set of tools that Google provides for any mobile device management software provider such as Ivanti or others to be able to configure and control and manage these devices. Well, what's really different about Android Enterprise is it's a cloud-based solution. It requires that the devices and the management software both have to be able to talk to Google servers. So Google kind of sits in the middle. The management software tells Google, hey, I want you to send this app down from the Play Store. I want you to send this profile. I want you to update the OS. And Google kind of sits in the middle as a way to make sure everything is happening in a secure method. Now, what this means for our customers is that they have to change the way they're doing things, is they have to now think about opening up to Google servers. Mm-hmm. A lot of our customers to this day run on what we call a dark network, meaning they let things talk inside the network. They let no traffic go outside to the internet. Right. The problem with that model is that although on the surface, it sounds like, hey, that's secure. I basically have built a wall around my devices. Nothing can get in. The problem with that model is that it leads to kind of a false sense of security. People then feel like, oh, okay, I have this wall, so I don't have to worry about patching my devices. I don't have to worry about being on the latest OS. I don't have to do security tests. But the reality is you're still letting people on your network all the time. So there's still vulnerabilities. Somebody can still get on there. And if they do get past that wall, there's no other defenses. With a cloud platform, people get a little bit nervous about it because they say, oh, I have to open up. That means that anybody can attack from the outside. That's not necessarily the case at all. It can be done securely, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit more later.
Well,
now,
I kind of want while we've got you, I want to dig down a little bit further, because I do think there are some of the questions that we got at registration were around opening this concept of I will have to open my network up, and also specifically around the warehouse or distribution center environment, there being a real hesitancy to do so. Do you want to kind of just talk through a little bit more about why this is something that would be a benefit to customers, and why they should not be afraid?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, there is a misconception that you have to, fling the doors wide open and allow everything into your network. The truth is, you only need to open up a very small window into the specific servers that you need to talk to. And you only need to do it on an outgoing basis. The way that it's designed is nothing is reaching in directly to talk to your devices. The devices are checking in with secure servers and saying, hey, do you have anything new for me? And if they do, then they'll pull it down. And when I say secure servers, I mean both Google as well as any good mobile device management provider is going to have very secure communication channels. They're going to have the right measures in place so that your device knows it's talking to the right server, so that it doesn't get confused or get something in the middle. And they're going to make sure it's designed in such a way that that communication happens securely. I know I can only speak from an Ivanti experience, but we have entire security teams dedicated to trying to break into our own systems. Essentially, every bit of code gets reviewed. We run it through tools. They're constantly trying to do what they call penetration testing to see if there's any way they can get through. And the great thing about a cloud-based system is if something is found, then it can be remediated immediately. It can be fixed for everybody. Versus today's model, where you have a piece of software installed on the site, if there's a security vulnerability found, then, well, a notice will be sent out. If you happen to see the notice, then you might reach out and figure out, okay, now how do I have to get the new version of software? How do I take everything offline? How do I update? It becomes an entire new migration just to fix a security vulnerability. The benefit with the cloud model, one of the benefits, is that that burden is actually shifted to the software provider. They are responsible to make sure that they're consistently keeping their system secure, and if a vulnerability is found, they fix it. And with a good cloud system, that fix can take place without having to take the system offline. So it means you get to keep doing your business without any interruptions to the system.
Which is really what we're looking for. We want as minimal disruption as possible while staying secure. Sam, that job actually sounds kind of fun. I don't know. Trying to, I'm sure that those folks enjoy what they do. That sounds kind of cool. But yeah, you're right. I think that there's, so, I guess I'm the one to kind of ask some of the more basic questions on this, and just so I understand. So Google is saying, we know that our operating system is the best for the enterprise. We want to, with security mindset, we want to make sure that we are moving people towards a more and more secure future. So Android Enterprise is the way to go in terms of management. It's going to have to interact with Google's cloud servers. Everybody just get in line and do it. Like, so what's the approach? How do we handle this? If this is the trajectory, this is the pathway. It still sounds to me, as someone who is hesitant with Google in my personal life, like, how do I really go about thinking about this from a business standpoint? And maybe Peter, this is where you can, and Keri, where you can jump into, but
yeah, well, I do think it's important to address, because I know there's probably some people listening right now that are thinking, okay, I still don't want to go to cloud, right? That makes them nervous because it's something new. So they're going to say, well, I'm just going to sit back and I'll worry about this later. The thing that I think is important for people to understand is that the way the industry is moving, the way technology is moving so quickly, you can't just sit back and lock in on a version like you used to. So the way that it works is Android announces ahead of time what their plans for future operating systems are, what things are going to get added and what things are going to be removed. And so we know that actually starting in Android 11, they are no longer going to be supporting the old way of managing Android devices that could be done, locally on a dark network. So from Android 11 onward, the only option for management is going to be going through this Android Enterprise cloud-based system. The other thing is that Android works with the hardware manufacturers, and there's agreements in place there. Again, this is all to keep things secure. When a hardware manufacturer decides to use Android in their device, they have to agree to a few things. They have to agree to keep the operating system updatable up to X number of versions. So if you buy it on 8, you're going to be able to upgrade to 9 and to 10. They also need to agree to provide support for a certain number of years, but then they have to agree to end of life it at a certain point as well. So they basically get this window where they can put out a device, they can support it, they can update it, they can keep it secure, and then they need to move on to a new platform so that they can go to the next versions. So what that means to our customers in very simple terms is that you have to have a plan for what you're going to do when your device hits that end. So it's a good conversation to have with your partners, with the device manufacturers. Say, hey, this device, how long can it be updated through Android? When is that end of life? And then start thinking about what your strategy is going to be for the next one. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to have to do that every year. I mean, we're talking about probably 5-6 year cycles here. So it's not like it's going to be constant, but it is something that you need to think about. Gone are the days. I like the sweating the assets term, but you can't just keep putting your devices together with duct tape as long as they're still doing their job and then keep using the same devices. So you really got to have a strategy in place.
Hey, it sounds to me, the device is part of a kind of a living, breathing ecosystem, right? And having that plan for how that, how that changes is a totally different ballgame than just saying, I'm going to buy a thing that does a thing, right? It's not, it's just part of something much, much larger, much greater. I appreciate the background info on kind of how these decisions get made.
And Jody,
yeah,
I just want to, obviously security is a huge part of it, right? And that's the basis for this conversation today. But, I also branch out in conversations with customers to talk a little bit about the business implications, right? And, is cloud better than in-premise? What are all the costs associated with a cloud implementation versus an in-premise? And, if you also start talking about kind of the business side of it, and most companies are thinking about it, but a lot aren't. You can take that to another level that, the business side and the business opportunity and the total cost of ownership with a cloud environment can help, in conjunction with security discussions, drive that transition faster.
I would hope that after kind of the amount of digital adoption that we've all gone through personally and professionally this last year, that those business cases are being heard a lot better today maybe than ever before. I don't think that I just think that we've probably also prized ourselves with the flexibility and agility that we've discovered, and also that we know that we need for the future, right? So it's not just about, it's the security components, of course, which is the, kind of that, I can't afford for this to happen, but then there's also that opportunity side. Keri, as Sam was talking, it just sounds like a lot to keep track of. So do you want to talk a little bit about, how companies can think through how in the world, that was my first thought when I heard Sam talking. It's like all these, versions and different things I need to keep track. How do I keep track of all this stuff?
Well, and just before I go there, you just said something interesting that we've been talking about a lot of barcoding is this, with technology kind of taking off in your personal life and understanding the cloud concept from your own personal device. Jody and I have talked a lot about the role of a CIO has now changed, and it's not just focusing on technology, it is focusing on business processes. And, they really, IT and the CIO really have to have as good, if not better, understanding of the business and where the business is going and how they can apply the future technology to that business, more so than ever. There was a time where it was like the CIO sat there and decided what servers they were going to put where, and now it is more of a business decision, and that leads to what to your question, Jody, and there is a lot to keep track of. And again, when we think about the fact that before we were just trying to make sure we could find the devices right in the four walls of a warehouse, like where's serial number 626, and now you're like, okay, well, I have that, but what are all the pieces that are on it? Where do I have to apply patching, apply updates? What devices are end of life? And barcoding, again, with the life cycle management processes, with our BOSS tool, using our partners, we're collecting that data. So device by device, we can tell you where you're at today. Working with our partners, we can tell you where you need to be. And once we have that in place, then it's how do we get there? So will we execute it? Do you need us to, will you execute it? Should we work together? Kind of what order we go in and kind of use best practices to get there. I can say when I was on the customer side, I could not keep track of all of that. It was just, and I was kind of around for this transition from it being really easy, like you just buy a new device when one breaks and off you go, to having to really start thinking about, not just the name of the piece of hardware, but the operating system and what applications are on it. And, it just kind of continues to build, and customers have to utilize their partner to get that level of detail. It's just not, short of building an entire team around mobility and lifecycle management and patch management, and not having those people pulled into other things like innovation and digitalization and all the other fun stuff that, pushes your company forward. It's a really good fit for, a company like Barcoding and our partners to step in and help dig through that data and put a repeatable plan in place.
I love it. I've been coaching this last year and been trying to teach my little 13-year-olds to play to each other's strengths. And I think
right
about this as, your expanded team, right? Let's play to each other's strengths, and where is your team strongest and where is our team strongest collectively, and how do we get to where we want to be? So really good.
Well, and just to add to that, Jody, I think you guys pointed out technology it's a treadmill. Once you get on it, you don't get to get off. And you can try to take it on yourself, but the problem is it's a full-time job for a team of people to keep track of everything that's going on. So just to reiterate, the importance of having the right people, surrounding yourself with the right people who can advise you and point out the things that are important and understands both the technology side and your business, so that they can figure out how to properly apply that and filter what's important for you. But another thing I think gets lost in all of this is the opportunity that comes with this, right? We talk a lot about how am I going to deal with these technology changes? Because to a certain degree, it can be a burden, but it also is a really big opportunity. So from our side, with our mobile device management software, MobileIron, this opens up a lot of opportunity for us, because once customers are opening up to the cloud, then we can also do cloud mobile device management, which comes with a lot of benefits for the customer. They don't have to manage their own servers. They don't have to worry about the certs and the security that goes along with it. They don't have to stand up a new server every time they roll out a new facility. So with a cloud system, all you have to do is set up your network, deploy your devices, point it to the cloud instance, and you're up and running. So it really shortens the amount of time required to stand up new facilities. And it gives you a true global view into all of your assets. You can have them broken out by warehouse or system or model, whatever you want, but you can have one pane of glass to look at your entire global infrastructure. And we have customers that are running over 300,000 devices on a single account. So the other benefit to a cloud system is it automatically scales. You don't have to worry about that problem of, oh, well, we just hit the 2,000, 3,000 device mark. All of a sudden, everything's running really slowly. We need to build a new server. This is, we got to beef up the specs. All that's automatically handled for you. So it really can be an opportunity to spend less time worrying about how to host the solution and more time thinking about the solution itself and how it's going to drive your business forward.
Yeah, which is the reason why I love that team concept, right? Like that's where you can be freed up to think about all those great things. Keri.
And I mean, Sam, I think you just listed 6 different roles in an organization, right? So you got the server guy, and you got the person who manages the certs, and the person who manages, like, that's the beauty. And if you've ever been on an outage call when a cert expired, it's not a fun conversation with the CIO. Like, we missed the expiration date. Like, it happens, right? And so, when we're having these conversations with customers, it's not just about, to your point, what the technology can do in security, but it's also like, talk to us about the team that's supporting this today and how many hours are they spending doing that? And part of the cost savings and part of the business cases, we can take all of this away from you, and I'm the person you call in the event that something happens. You don't have 7 other people, like, it's me and solely me that's responsible in the event that something happens to your devices. And that, being someone who managed far too many vendors in a vendor management role, it's much nicer to be able to call one person to get some kind of a technology issue or a security update done versus having to pull a bunch of different vendors and internal people together to try to work through the issue.
Well, and I'm sure if you go to any one of those people and those teams that you described and said, I'm going to take away one system that you don't have to worry about anymore, none of them are going to say, no, I have too little work to do. No,
Right.
They're going to say, great, now I can focus on the other 50 servers that I have to keep up and running.
Exactly.
In this hyper competitive world that, all of our customers live in, and the speed at which they need to deliver product or, just have a very efficient operation, the cloud has enormous benefits, much like what we just talked about, to address being more competitive and more cost effective.
Well, and of course, so everybody is running towards that future, and I love that we're ending so positively with all the opportunity, because I do think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and I do think this is a very positive move, in terms of the continuum of where technology is continuing to advance. I know that I just want to touch upon this before we run out of time. Obviously, barcoding, part of how we've adapted and changed is to be able to support our customers more fully with our lifecycle services. Ivanti Wavelink, you guys have also taken some strategic moves and made some strategic directional additions with MobileIron. Peter, do you want to kind of talk us through the MobileIron piece a little bit?
Yeah, so for those on the line that are familiar with the Wavelink product line, if you will, we have had over the years, we were probably a pioneer in it, as Sam talked about, the Avalanche MDM, mobile device management tool. Well, since we've been part of this broader Ivanti company, they have a lot of different solutions that are in the IT space, service management, patch management, things of those nature. And some of that is going to bleed over to the supply chain piece or the Wavelink piece. But they have some super aggressive growth plans organically and inorganically. And so they acquired MobileIron. We acquired MobileIron a few months ago. So that creates a shift for our customers to move into the cloud-based world with a MobileIron UEM. Sam talked about that earlier, solution. And that can help customers transition from Avalanche over to MobileIron or the new Ivanti UEM solution as they move to the Android space, the iOS space, the Android for enterprise space. So we'll be having side-by-side solutions in our world with Avalanche and MobileIron moving forward.
Awesome. So we're coming to a little bit of a close here, and I want to kind of go through again, just making sure that we hit some of the highlights that we promised folks. Really talking about that cloud model. Some of the things that I heard when we talked about some of the benefits, is particularly for supply chain or components of the supply chain business. Two things that stuck out to me. One was, of course, the security. The security is there, but the scalability was something that I really keyed on. And I think that's really vital as we look at a supply chain ecosystem that's going to be increasingly pressured. So I think the scalability is huge. Keri, we always talk about things needing to be flexible and agile, and I think that kind of goes along with it. I think there's a sustainability piece in the sense of we are looking out for the long run, right? So we are trying to build something that can scale, but also be sustainable and secure for our customers. Sam, Peter, Keri, any other, kind of ways to tie a bow on this in terms of really thinking at that holistic level supply chain, why this is so vital, this cloud model? Or did I hit it all?
No, I mean, I can chime in here, and it just kind of reiterates some of the messaging we've already talked about is, don't let the effort involved to get there discourage you from getting there. Because once you do, I think you're going to start reaping a lot of benefits, and those benefits are going to be continual. When technology moves really fast, and moving to the cloud gets you into a platform that can keep up. And even better, it keeps up in a way where you're not responsible for making it keep up. Other people have to make it keep up, and then you get to reap the benefits of that. And so we didn't even have time to talk today about some of the other things that we're looking at. But once you get your management pieces in the cloud, it starts to open up opportunities for us as software providers to give you better solutions, to be able to do things like data analytics and device health. When we have a window into all of the devices, we can point out to you, hey, these couple of devices are not performing like the rest of the ones in your system. You may want to consider pulling them off the floor. Or these batteries have gone through too many charge cycles. You should look at getting new ones. So it just opens up a lot of opportunities for us to be a little more proactive and predictive, and to let you know when a problem's going to happen instead of waiting until a problem does happen.
Love it. And we always want to leave them with a little something, leave them wanting more, Sam. So I think that's a really good way to kind of say, hey, if you want to hear more on the analytics front, we're happy to connect with you after the huddle. So feel free. Iris just gave you an email address. So you can add your questions, further questions if you have them. I think that on that front, the analytics are really exciting, because I still think they're driving towards the ultimate goal, which is like, how do we make our companies more efficient, accurate, and connected? How do we deliver the best possible user and customer experiences out there? Because that's where the pressure is really coming from. Those expectations continue to rise, and all of these efforts from a mobile computing standpoint are really driving towards those same end, strategic business goals. All right, we are down to the final question of the day. And this one's always the hardest, because I always like to leave the audience with a very quick hit, right? So I'm going to give you, I'll give you a quick phrase. So not a full sentence, but think phrase. If you had to sum up or give one key takeaway to the audience in one short phrase, what would it be? Let's see. Let's start with, who seems ready? Keri seems ready. Keri, what's that one little piece of gold that you want to leave with the audience?
Planning for the execution is the key.
Nice. Okay, planning and execution is the key. Peter, let's go to you next.
So it was kind of talked about a minute ago, but the 3 S's, right? Security, scalability, and speed will really help your business significantly. Don't be afraid of those.
Love it. And to finish it all up, Mr. Gonzales.
Yeah, I would just say that, remember that you're not in this alone. The key to running a successful business, in my opinion, is to surround yourself with people who are really good at what they do. And there are a lot of people in this industry that are really good at what they do, and they're willing to help you achieve your goals.
I couldn't have said it better myself. We are here, Barcoding, Ivanti Wavelink, we are here for you. So please feel free to check out the links that have been provided. We'll be sharing a recording of this. It will also be live on our YouTube channel in a few days. So you can kind of rewind, rewatch, check out your favorite parts all over again. So that'll be available to you as well. We will be sharing additional feedback as we get it. So keep an eye on our social media channels. We usually share our latest and greatest through there. You can always reach out to me via my email address, jody.costa@barcoding.com. Really want to thank you all for being here today. Ivanti Wavelink, Peter, Sam, thank you so much for joining a Barcoding huddle and kind of having a fun conversation. Keri, thanks for being our special guest. We appreciate it.
Oh, Jody, before you go, I'm going to have to call you out there. Someone asked, do you have a phrase? to contribute.
Do I have a phrase to contribute? No, nobody asks me questions. I ask the questions.
Sorry, they called you out, Jody.
Let's see, what would my phrase be? Well, I feel like Sam stole it, but I'll just end with call barcoding. How about that?
Perfect.
Good sales and marketing person. I'll leave it with call barcoding. So, all right, Iris, I appreciate you and our intrepid questionnaire, Sam Schumann. I appreciate you as well. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we will see you back next month for Barcoding Huddle. If you have additional questions, please reach out. And thank you so much, Ivanti Wavelink. We'll catch you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, did you enjoy the huddle? I sure hope so. We were really excited to have you as part of our conversation and would love to continue it. If you have a question or a challenge that you're facing and barcoding can help you out, please reach out. You can contact us on barcoding.com anytime or any of our social media channels. Again, we are here to help and would love to chat with you. Final ideas. Did you like the huddle so much you wanted to join? Do you want to come on air with me? Do you know someone who would be a great fit or a topic that you'd like to see covered? If so, reach out to me via email or LinkedIn, and I am happy to check in with you and talk through what we might be able to accomplish together. I would love to hear your ideas. We're always looking for new topics. So if you have an idea for Huddle or you'd like to be on a Huddle, contact me and we will make it happen. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.